We'll call this one Fraud is Everywhere. Oh, I think this is about 30 years ago. At one of the schools that I taught at, there was a guy who actually went to prison for fraud, and basically he was in charge of estates, like repair contracts and stuff like that, and what he was doing was pushing these contracts to his mates, and then he was obliged to get quotes, but he's just basically making up inflated quotes from other suppliers, and then his mate would come in. It would be cheaper but still ridiculously too expensive, and he got rumbled by the auditors for that, and he went to jail. I worked in a school where two bursars actually quit their jobs because the head of the school was basically asking them to commit fraud, and they just refused to do it. So that caused massive bad feeling between them and the head who asked them to do the fraud. And what they decided to do was, rather than do the fraud, they just quit. Now imagine what would have happened in 2020, 2021 if other people had taken that same moral stand against fraud. Countries and even regions of countries have their own distinctive cultures. And culture are the unwritten rules that define what's acceptable and what's unacceptable. And this can vary considerably from place to place. Different countries, different regions of countries have got their own distinctive cultures. A country's culture can also change over time. And I'm a Brit, so I'm allowed to say this, but over my lifetime, the culture of Britain has changed, and not in a good way. And it's my contention now that in the UK, fraud is an awful lot more common than it used to be, than it was when I was a child. Now, that's not to say that everybody in the UK is a fraudster. I know plenty of people who have kind of rejected the herd, the direction in which the herd has been galloping, and are still decent people. But I think the problem that we have is that most people are followers, and they'll just conform to whatever happens to be socially acceptable at the time. So let's talk about the criminal deception that is fraud. So simply put, fraud is a deception designed to create a financial gain. So according to Investopedia, fraud is falsification either by withholding important information, lying or faking documents. So often the perpetrator of fraud knows something that the intended victim of the fraud doesn't know. Now in economics, they call that situation an information asymmetry. Now at this stage I've got to tread quite carefully because I don't want to get the video pulled by the gulag tube censors. Spot the red squirrel. So let's just say that this is a hypothetical situation. So I'm not saying this has happened, I'm just saying, like, you know, it's a thought experiment, right, for the benefit of the censor. So yeah, let's imagine that a pharmaceutical company invents and develops a new drug, and they want to use fraud to try to increase their profits. So what sort of things could they do? Well, like, they could tell lies. They could say that this medicine does all sorts of fantastic things that it doesn't do. They might also lie about what's in this product. It might contain all sorts of horrible things that most people wouldn't want in their bodies. So how do you get them to consent to that? You just simply lie, don't you? You lie about what this product contains. That'd be an example of fraud, would it not? Of course, in most countries, modern countries, there's government regulators, you know. So how would you overcome that hurdle? Well, you just get them to be party to the fraud. And how would you do that? Well, you'd make it worth their while, wouldn't you, financially? You'd either bribe them directly, or you'd maybe do it a little bit more subtly through what's called the revolving door. So you'd say to these guys, come and work for us once your career as a regulator is over, and we'll sort you out. Indeed, what you could do is enrich people who've maybe already finished in that role, and that would send out a very powerful message to people who are currently in position as a regulator. It's like, well, look at how they sorted out XYZ who used to work for the regulator before. What type of person's attracted into politics? Are politicians well known for their integrity? How about their honesty? Yeah, so politicians, that's not really a problem. They're pretty cheap to buy off, aren't they? So they'll be very happy to be recruited into being part of your fraud. Now again, we've got to be careful here, so I'm just going to stress it one more time that this is a hypothetical situation. But in Britain, if you wanted to fraudulently make money from I don't know, dangerous drugs, say, you'd need to get GPs involved, because they would be the people prescribing your drug. Now the thing is that healthcare in the UK is highly centralised. So all you need to do is to nobble a few people right at the very top of the NHS who are in charge of setting incentive systems for GPs and health protocols, which drugs to prescribe in which particular situations. And then once you've done that, it's simple, isn't it? Because the GPs, as you know, what they'll do, it's human nature, people respond to incentives, so they'll follow the money, won't they? Rather than the science, like Harry Lime. So I guess what I'm saying here is that fraud is a massive problem in many countries, but I think in the UK it's a huge problem. It's just become, what do they call it now? Being economical with the truth, win at all cost culture. I saw this at the last school that I was teaching at. That was the main culture. Didn't matter what you did, so long as you achieved your objectives. So lie, cheat and steal to get what you want. Who cares? That's the attitude. So I've seen fraud, a lot of people get involved in fraud. I know somebody who, I'm not even sure whether there was a burglary, but they were short of money. So they claimed all sorts of things on their household insurance that hadn't been stolen. That's an example of fraud. Police officers who did dodgy stuff during the lockups, they were going along with fraudulent lies too, weren't they? In Britain, your kids got to do very well in exams. For kind of social status points, it's very important. So that has then led to a cottage industry of fraud within the education system, particularly in private schools. So they all employ educational psychologists, and basically what happens is that there's a whole industry around not solving dyslexia, but around 25% extra time in public exams. So frauds, like, it just became very well known that if you want to get extra time, go and see the educational psychologist, and then they'll test your writing speed. So all you have to do is write really slow, pretend there's a problem when there's not, and then you get 25% extra time in your exams. And you don't even have to disclose it on your CV. It's not printed on the exam certificates that you got whatever grades you got with the benefit of a 25% extra time over what other people had. It's all fraud, isn't it? Fraud. You know, in this situation, the party on the wrong side of the asymmetric information is employers, that they ended up hiring people who they thought were pretty bright because they had certain qualifications, but when they got hired they suddenly found that they were just ridiculous, you know, useless, like really slow. So yeah, this is fraud. People pretending to have I don't know what you'd call it, educational disabilities, not being as fast as other people. Like being fast at work, it's kind of quite an important factor, isn't it? Anyway, so they deliberately try to deceive other people. They know they're not dyslexic, really, but they know that they can swing a test with the help of their parents, with the help of their teachers, who are all in on this fraud. So the other day I was watching a video from Veritas Vincent, Lee's channel, and Lee was basically saying that, to paraphrase, I think we've only got ourselves to blame, and I think he's absolutely right. What's happened has happened because way too many of us have embraced immorality for either personal financial gain or some other personal gain like ego status, and basically we get what we deserve. The world that we're experiencing is a direct consequence of the actions en masse of the people that we live amongst. And there's been way too many people who just think it's okay to be dishonest and commit fraud. In the comments below, you can give me other examples of just fraud that most people do. And most people, they don't bat an eyelid at it. They just think, yeah, everyone else does it. Win at all costs, I'm going to do it too. And it just becomes part of the culture. So how do we change things? Well, as I've said before now, quite a few videos, we have to change. We have to become better people. And yes, you can get at it through natural law, but I think if you actually read even just one of the Gospels of the New Testament, maybe Matthew, all would become clear. But I think for many people, they're demonically possessed. They get triggered massively at that thought, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? It's a pause for thought moment. Anyway, that's all I want to say today, so God bless.